The sun had set on Mulberry Lane, casting long shadows across the cobblestone street. The gas lamps flickered to life, illuminating the quaint row of Victorian-style houses with their neatly trimmed hedges and colorful flower beds. As the residents of Mulberry Lane went about their evening routines, they were oblivious to the dark secret that lurked in their midst. It was a moonless night, and the fog rolled in, shrouding the street in an eerie mist. The silence was broken by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the lane, sending chills down everyone's spine. The neighbors rushed out of their homes, drawn towards the source of the scream. They found Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly widow who lived in the corner house, lying lifeless on her front porch. Her eyes were wide open in terror, and her hands were clutching at her throat. It was clear that she had been strangled. The news spread like wildfire, and soon the entire neighborhood was buzzing with speculation and suspicion. Everyone had their theories, but no one could explain who would want to harm Mrs. Jenkins, a kind and well-respected member of the community. Detective James Anderson was assigned to the case, and he immediately set out to investigate. He carefully combed through Mrs. Jenkins' house, searching for clues. However, the only thing he found was a broken vase near her lifeless body. As Detective Anderson delved deeper into the case, he discovered that Mrs. Jenkins had recently made some enemies due to her involvement in a local charity organization. Some of her neighbors had argued with her over a proposed community project, while others had clashed with her over petty disputes. But as Detective Anderson interviewed the suspects, he realized that everyone seemed to have an alibi for the time of the murder. The case grew more puzzling by the minute, and the tension in Mulberry Lane rose. As the investigation continued, Detective Anderson uncovered a web of secrets and hidden motives among the residents of Mulberry Lane. He learned that Mrs. Jenkins had been involved in a bitter feud with one of her neighbors over a property dispute, and had received threatening letters in the weeks leading up to her murder. With each clue, the puzzle seemed to unravel further, but the killer remained elusive. The tension in Mulberry Lane escalated as suspicions grew among the residents. Friendships were strained, and accusations were thrown around. As the days turned into weeks, Detective Anderson's frustration mounted. He was determined to solve the case and bring the killer to justice, but the evidence was scarce, and the motives were murky. He knew that time was running out, and the pressure to solve the case weighed heavily on him. Then, one stormy night, Detective Anderson received an anonymous tip. It led him to a hidden alley behind Mulberry Lane, where he stumbled upon a piece of evidence that cracked the case wide open. But before he could make an arrest, a figure emerged from the shadows, wielding a weapon. A chilling standoff ensued, with Detective Anderson facing off against the mysterious figure. The tension was palpable, as the two adversaries locked eyes. And just as the situation seemed to reach its boiling point, a gunshot rang out, shattering the night. The story of the mysterious murder on Mulberry Lane had taken an unexpected turn, leaving everyone on edge. The residents of Mulberry Lane held their breath, waiting for the truth to be revealed and justice to be served. But who had fired the shot? And would Detective Anderson finally uncover the identity of the killer and bring them to justice? The answer remained shrouded in mystery, as the case continued to unravel, revealing secrets that no one had anticipated. The gunshot echoed through the alley, and Detective Anderson's instincts kicked in. He quickly took cover, drawing his own weapon, as he scanned the area for the source of the shot. The figure that had emerged from the shadows disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty. Detective Anderson cautiously approached the spot where the figure had been standing, his heart pounding in his chest. He found a discarded weapon, but it was impossible to determine who had fired the shot. The rain poured down, adding to the chaos of the scene as Detective Anderson tried to piece together what had just happened. As he searched the area for clues, he stumbled upon a hidden passage that led to a small, abandoned warehouse. He cautiously entered the building, his flashlight piercing through the darkness. The sight that awaited him was shocking. In the dim light, Detective Anderson found himself standing amidst a clandestine meeting of Mulberry Lane's residents. There were hushed whispers and nervous glances as the suspects realized they had been caught. Among them was Mr. Thompson, the neighbor who had been in a bitter feud with Mrs. Jenkins over the property dispute. With the evidence and the suspects in front of him, Detective Anderson interrogated each one, trying to piece together the puzzle. Tensions were high, and accusations were thrown back and forth. The suspects all had their alibis, but Detective Anderson was determined to find the truth. As the hours ticked by, Detective Anderson's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. He carefully examined the evidence, listened to the suspects' stories, and probed for inconsistencies. But the more he dug, the more confusing the case became. Then, a breakthrough came when a witness, who had been hesitant to come forward, finally spoke up. The witness revealed crucial information that shed new light on the case. It turned out that Mrs. Jenkins had stumbled upon a secret scheme involving the property dispute, and her life was in danger as a result. With this new information, Detective Anderson's focus shifted, and he honed in on the true motive behind the murder. He confronted the suspects with the evidence and the witnesses' testimony, and the tension in the room reached its peak. Just as Detective Anderson was about to make an arrest, chaos erupted. The suspects began accusing each other, pointing fingers and shouting over one another. Amidst the commotion, another shot rang out, and Detective Anderson watched in horror as one of the suspects fell to the ground, injured. Pandemonium ensued as Detective Anderson sprang into action, calling for backup and securing the scene. The injured suspect was rushed to the hospital, and the remaining suspects were taken into custody. But the identity of the shooter remained a mystery, as they had disappeared into the confusion. As the rain continued to pour down, Detective Anderson was left with more questions than answers. Who had fired the shot? What was the true motive behind Mrs. Jenkins' murder? And would he be able to untangle the web of secrets and lies that had engulfed Mulberry Lane? The case remained unresolved,